Good evening, morning, afternoon, whatever applies to you, and welcome back to yet another EuroLeague. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Keire and, of course, Nymaera to discuss all things First Stand 2026. But before we do that, guys, of course, well, actually, we're not tackling my passive, would you rather? Instead, I want to give you a question, potentially a very easy question, potentially a very difficult question. Nymaera, I will come to you first on this. If
Right.
you could pick a movie, sequel or franchise, like it doesn't matter. You're either picking to have a sequel or just have an additional movie in the franchise. That would be the perfect movie and or sequel to represent that franchise. What would it be? For example, you could pick like I don't know anything. Resident Evil, if you liked that
Wait, so
those
hang on. So this is
movies.
both movies or games, or is this is movie
No, no, just
specifically?
just movie
Okay.
specifically. If you
And
pick
this is
any
like a
one
sequel
franchise,
which, okay, one movie which describes the franchise, but it's not the original.
no. Let me
Uh,
rephrase.
you
Let me
said a
rephrase.
sequel, right? So,
So basically, you are choosing a movie to be made in this franchise, and said movie
right.
will be perfect. No, like whether or not it's
Oh,
Terminator
okay.
5
Right, right,
or
right,
whether or
right,
not it's
right.
just an additional movie in a certain
Ooh.
universe, and that movie will be the perfect movie for that franchise.
Oh, that's a hard one because there are a bunch of okay, there are a bunch of franchises I think have been done a massive disservice by some of their continued content, and I think they could be in dire need of that. So there are a couple of things which immediately spring to mind. Halo. The TV show was fucking awful, but that world, especially the original trilogy of games, is so rich and so wonderful. There was initially a Halo movie planned, and I think that that would have been wonderful. So that's right up there on the list. In terms of other franchises that have been massively mishandled, I think that Warhammer 40,000 is up there because that's a franchise now which is now what 30 plus years old. And the people making Warhammer 40k content are people who are fans of Warhammer 40k and grew up with it and actually don't understand really, I don't think, the actual material which influenced and inspired its media, which means that they're kind of like just bastardizing itself as it goes on rather than kind of getting down to the real gritty roots of, rooted weirdly in reality actually from 40k as well. So I think 40k, one of those things where actually the setting is so expansive and it focuses on such small bits of it, which just it's just the fucking Primarch's demigods ruining life for everyone. Which I think actually that would be if you had a perfect 40k movie, it would be just incredible. And then Mass Effect as well. I think Mass Effect has some really rich lore, and as Keire was saying, effect in a previous episode, the world building is the special part of it. If you actually have a really good story within that setting, it would go wild. So those are the three which immediately spring to mind. Now I have to decide between them. That's the hard bit.
Yeah. While we wait for you to ponder that, Kira, what are you thinking?
Warhammer a Horse Heresy movie would be really good. I think that would be because Hollywood would be able to throw actors at it. So I think I know it's going to be perfect regardless because of the nature of the question. But I mean, I think there's like some Marvel-esque thing that you could do with that. Um,
God, I hope
Personally,
not.
actually,
Fucking hell.
no. In terms of like
Yeah, I know what you
the
mean.
like
Building your
yeah
universe. Yeah, yeah, sure.
yeah universe. As much as I hate Marvel, it is an impressive movie feat in terms of the scope and idea. It is like very, very like ambitious. There you go. It's
It
a
is
very ambitious
ambitious. It
idea.
is
There we
ambitious.
go.
Yeah.
One second.
Um, but I would actually choose probably Ian M. Banks' Culture series. 'Cause I think that would really like basically Black Mirror episodes, but good sci-fi. I think that would be pretty incredible. I think that would open people's eyes up to a lot of like different things. Um, Eh, that or I think Malazan would be like the greatest visual thing ever if it was going to be perfect. I think Malazan Book of the Fallen would be the most like genuinely perfect like visual like storytelling. A lot of like the dream sequences and the moving between the different worlds, the
Wouldn't that
flying
just like?
castles.
But imagine they made the perfect movie out of that, though. Wouldn't that just stop people ever reading the books because the guy spends about 15 fucking pages describing each and every inch of a battlefield? So you'd be like, might just watch the movie.
I mean, Stephen Erickson's not that bad for like describing battlefields. Stephen Erickson, no, Stephen Erickson is really a thingy on dialogue between characters. He loves just writing dialogue between like characters just for the sake of writing dialogue between characters. The one book that is crazy is obviously like Bone Hunters, which is the whole thing about the chain of dogs, and like obviously it's very descriptive because the battles are like part of that mythos. But yeah, I think Malazan. I would go with Malazan, just in terms of like so like left wing people could like just shut the fuck up and accept that like, finally something actually did get made for them as well.
Fair play.
Mate, seriously, there's perfectly good left wing fantasy there to be used to be made, and it's like
What
you
Star
can have
Trek?
it.
Star Trek is
Yeah.
very Star Trek is like
yeah.
the biggest like socialist utopia. Like that, yeah. Star Trek is out there, folks. You know, the Federation's got its stuff together. You know,
Post-scarcity society.
I think I'm going to piss off a lot of people with my answer because I think the franchise is in most need of a genuinely like awesome film. And remember the word I use as well in the question was perfect, right? Is Star Wars. Because Star Wars, I'm sorry, Star Wars is dog shit.
That was actually on my list. It
Star
legitimately
Wars
was.
is complete dog shit. Almost everything associated with Star Wars, bar a couple of things, is total and utter dog shit.
What, but 3.5 things.
Star Wars has some really cool lore, some really cool concepts, some really cool characters, and someone competent, I am sure, could hypothetically put it all together and make something fucking awesome. But up until now, I'm sorry, Star Wars is a dog shit franchise with the most absolutely heinously used lore of all time. So yeah.
Specifically, I think that Knights of the Old Republic era would be really cool. Like if they could actually delve into Treya and like there is some really cool stuff. Now I think Andor was really good. Andor's really good, and I think that Empire Strikes Back is a good movie. It was also very bold in the way that it basically said, by the way, this movie is going to be the good guys getting their asses handed to them for about 2 hours solid. So good luck with that, which is pretty sick.
It's all right. It's all right. You know, here's my problem, my issue with Star Wars, because even though I'd say obviously, you know, you're far more sort of nuanced than most if you're like a fan of Star Wars, but you know, whatever your critiques are of the series, but I really don't like it in general when people are like, oh yeah, someone says, yeah, I don't really like Star Wars or how they use the lore, and it feels like they've kind of butchered it and they could have done so much more because what an amazing universe, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, I know, man, like ever since the original trilogy, shut the fuck up. The original trilogy is shit. The only good thing about it is how unbelievably cinematically impressive it was era for era. Unbelievable, incredible. They did an amazing visual experience. If you went to the cinema in 1970, whatever the fuck, and saw that, holy shit, that would have been an awesome experience. But as actual movies, as actual storytelling, characters, it's shit. It's fucking bad.
The first two movies are good. The third one, they lose the plot. No. You don't think The Empire Strikes Back is a good movie?
And even then, I think that the third... I will say as well, I think there are specific sequences which are just incomparable to anything else. I think that like the space battle sequence in Return of the Jedi is just so wonderfully shot. It's just really well done. The way that they managed to get that out of like models as well. Like the cinematography is fucking incredible.
Era for era, it's an 11 out of 10. Like visually, it's an 11 out of 10. Era for era, it's incredible. You know, the only thing... Sorry, the only thing that somewhat puts it in its place, very different in completely different ways, is obviously 2001 came out before Star Wars, and some of the shit they did with like practical effects is like fucking bananas. Mate, I still watch some of those scenes now and don't even understand how they shot them. Like the revolving fucking spaceship is obviously one of the most famous scenes. Like, how the fuck did they do that? Like, that is crazy. But... you know, even so, era for era, unbelievable, 10 out of 10, 2 thumbs up for Mr. George Lucas, whatever, but I don't care what anyone says. I think those movies are fucking
That's another franchise, which has now had fans of the franchise now make the franchise now is the problem, and actually, they don't go back to the well in terms of actually what inspired this in terms of the samurai and the Western movies and the space opera like Flash Gordon. I found that, Rogue One and Andor was interesting because it took such a different spin on it, because well, it's basically, I mean, the opening text scroll comes from Flash Gordon. That's where it comes from for Star Wars. A lot of people don't realize that. Rogue One and Andor was interesting because it was a very gritty, down to earth take, and but it still went back to a very kind of like first principles derivative, going back to like the base genre of war movies, effectively, and spy movies, which was a very different set of reference bases, but it worked really, really well for it. But sadly, you know, you compare it to something like Asuka or Mandalorian, I'm like, I just don't think the quality is the same for those.
Yeah, I always get a lot of flack for this, and I will caveat this by saying I have only seen it once, so it is possible that it's not a great take. I always say Rogue One is the best Star Wars movie by a distance as well,
no,
by the way.
Can I say, the Rogue One is only the best because what it leads to, and because you know emotionally what it resonates into with the first film.
Well, yes and no, but that's kind of like saying Twin Peaks: The Return is only good because of like it's working off the back of what they fucked up in season 2 and shit. And it somehow manages to strip all the rubbish and then put something together amazing. It's like, nah, Rogue One is just better. But it was able to do something with very little, is how I would put it. Like, I don't think there's much meat to be garnered from those movies. I think it just did a really fucking good job of dancing around those movies and actually making a very good watchable film. So I don't give any credit to the first movies for giving Rogue One some kind of platform or whatever to make a good movie. Nah, fuck that. Like, as I said, those first 2 movies are Twin Peaks season 2 for me. Like, nah, get out of here. But anyway, moving swiftly on to First Stand. Well, before we talk about First Stand, actually, we have to address the obviously the Chinese elephant in the room from this past week, which was obviously match fixing in the LPL. Who could ever known? Who could ever have guessed? Must be a first. So yeah, let's talk about that. Now, framing it for people who didn't read any of the articles or anything around the issue thus far. Basically, the jungler for top esports, Nehu, I believe is how you pronounce his name, has reportedly, I guess I have to say reportedly at this point, admitted to match fixing during their playoff
Nio
series.
is his name,
Nio, okay. Against Weibo. Again, for people who didn't watch the series, basically what he actually did in the game was, first and foremost, this is, I guess, the objective stuff, is he bought really stupidly. Like, he bought a bunch of MR when they were, like, mostly physical damage. He was playing Skarner for extra context, I guess. But some of his gameplay was also, like, horrendously bad, like really fucking bad. And there are compilations on Twitter and stuff on YouTube that you can go and see of some very questionable things he did in the top lane and in jungle during this game, if you want to get a better idea of what turbo inting in pro play looks like. So yeah, before I throw it to you guys, just to add a little bit of context, I think I saw Clement Shu maybe, or a couple of other people sort of giving some background on why it happens, why match fixing is a thing, and yeah, how these issues come to pass basically, and why would a pro player ever do this, and so on. Now, I'm not going to say that these numbers are like concrete or anything other than just some rough ballpark guess or something, but he basically intimated that a player like that, who's not a knight or someone on some mega contract, could be offered basically like 10 times their monthly salary just to throw like a singular game. Now, again, does that justify anything? Absolutely not. Do we know the background or the situation of this individual? I certainly don't. Is his family living on the street? You know, anything's on the table for me at that point. I have no context or whatever. So this is not about justifying what happened or anything like that. But just to give you some kind of context, match fixing money is serious business. That is the point. And that is also why it has been a thing, particularly in the LDL in China, is you have a huge discrepancy between the amount of money that you are able to make as a player for 90% of the player base versus what you're being offered by these people or Shadow Corps or whatever to do this shady business. So that is sort of the long and short of it in terms of the facts. Now, obviously, I want your guys' takes and opinions on what this means for the league going forward, etc., on this. So I'll throw it over to you first, Nymaera. What are your sort of initial thoughts and feelings on this?
So this comes in the context of, you know, Milky Way getting suspended last year indefinitely, Bo being suspended indefinitely after, what was that, 2021, and then came over in, was that 2021 or 22, and then came over to EU after that. The reason why this is so significant, and for those of you not completely clued up on what's happened, so it was Nio's coach, Coach Poppy from Top Esports. He basically said on stream that Nio had basically admitted to losing every game in playoffs that they did do intentionally. Now, it has been, since that point, walked back in terms of him saying, well, you know, I've exaggerated. And I think the reason for that is effectively, it is very different having someone suspended for serious claims, but things which are still within a margin of doubt or a margin of error, another thing entirely for someone to out and out say, I've intentionally lost games at particularly this level of play. Now, LDL, the development league in LPL, has been rife with match fixing. This has been a very publicly covered topic, so it's not like there's anything new. And of course, we've had these big players as well, which I believe in the case of Bo was certainly in the case of LDL, didn't do it in LPL, and of course he won all of his games there. That was famously, he got banned after being on a huge win streak from FPX in 2021, I believe that was again. So that's why this is so serious. This is like an out-and-out admission, secondhand technically through the coach, alongside rumors of the fact that it was Jachi and Cream who effectively went to the organization and said, we believe that Nio has been match fixing, and do something about it effectively. That's the information which we have. So there was this very, very out-and-out statement by Poppy on his stream that's since been rescinded. I think the cat's kind of out of the bag with that now, and it has been kind of downgraded to somewhat of like, it's still under investigation. However, there are so many eyes on this now, and I think that the reputation and the integrity of the LPL has been hit by this regardless now. A couple other things which are important in context too. I believe, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong here, Keire, on this. I don't believe there's actually a law in China against match fixing specifically.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's okay.
It gets a little bit grey area, right, in terms of how things are applied, but it's, like, it's not as easy as that.
Okay, you committing the act under duress, I believe, is not a crime like it would be in other countries. That is the point of the law, right? Okay? That, I believe. I am not a lawyer. Chinese law is even more foreign to me than others. I only know tangentially from knowing people in China also, and people who gamble in from China or in Chinese regions, right? Or are Chinese abroad who gamble, right? And
it's worth noting that in general, gambling is illegal within China, which is why they travel. If people do it, sometimes they'll travel abroad, or they'll do it while they're abroad for whatever reason.
Or if you're in regions owned by China, but are people with Chinese ethnicity, like Macau, is literally just Las Vegas. The same way gambling was illegal in the US, but Las Vegas had massive casinos, right? Macau has a gambling culture. Of the similar thing. Match fixing and the act of doing it. What is illegal is paying someone to match fix. They are different. In the UK, it's a two-way crime. The match fixer and the person.
So if you are paying or have been paid, it's illegally the way. Whereas I think in China, it's like, if you're the one that's being paid for it, then it's getting a bit weird.
Yeah, well, it'd be bribery, but you committing the actual act is not match fix. The act is not in itself a crime. There you go. That is it. To give you an example, in the snooker world, Peter Higgins,
John Higgins.
John Higgins, sorry, Jesus, thank you. He was not able to be thingied with match fixing because they could not prove that he actually fixed any of the matches, but they recorded him being paid money to fix the match, right? And so he was able to be charged with one set of circumstances, but not the other, even though both are applicable in the UK.
Yeah. So the reason why this is important is that legally things are in a grey area. It's a little bit different if, so for instance, there was something about Milky Way, of course, another big name that was kind of implicated in the things, basically trying to sue someone for defamation. That's very different because that actually does get into kind of a legal issue. So the question is basically on a moral and an integrity level, what's that done towards LPL and what does that signify as well? Because obviously Rich, I mean, what was this, 2 years ago now or something? You were saying effectively that you had heard rumors of match fixing with LPL, and regardless of how deep or how specific that was or anything, it raises that question again. And if there's, I don't know how much more we'll hear from this investigation. I would imagine that now is going to be indefinitely banned and they won't go into detail. But I think because of what happened with Poppy on stream, it's very hard to not have doubts about that situation now, which is why LPL are probably just going to hope that this blows over.
By the way,
I hope that the update blows over.
On that, I think this is something that's worth noting. I think part of the reason that maybe he said something on stream is for that exact reason, which is in China, a lot of the time, things just happen, and then if it's in the best interest of a bunch of particular parties, whether it be maintaining the integrity of something or maybe upholding someone's reputation or whatever it is, you probably won't hear that much about it. I think the public nature of this unfolding is why we are all hearing about it in the way that we're hearing about it. In terms of like the stuff that I'd heard previously, honestly, I mean, I'm not going to be too heavy-handed with my wording, but it was certainly more than rumor. I mean, as I've said, I basically stated that match fixing has been, or to my best of my knowledge, match fixing has been pretty rife in LPL for basically, I'll say since like 2017 onwards. I feel is like when it really sort of took more of a hold. I've seen, again, can I verify like the credibility of all of these documents or whatever? I've basically seen incredibly, amazingly well put together fakes, if they are fakes. Obviously, I don't believe them to be fakes. Of like police documents looking into various people in players in China, household names in China, former world champions in China who have been associated with match fixing. Now, whether or not they definitely did, whether or not they were pressured and actually ended up not doing it or did do it, but under I don't know, and that's why obviously I've never commented on the specifics online, which leads to people saying, why would you just put this out there? You're obviously lying, blah blah blah, and it's like, well, the more months, the more splits that go by, it becomes more and more clear, doesn't it, that this is a thing that certainly exists. So yeah, this has been a problem. The point is, this has been a problem for a long time, and generally speaking, I think it is in the interest of China in general, even beyond the league, to not have loads of fucking people get exposed for match fixing. So I think whether Poppy decided or not, like, to go live on stream or whatever to say this because he knew that was the case or not, I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case.
So I'll unpack a little bit here solo. So a couple of things that you need to accept. I can speak quite plainly. I don't give a fuck, right? China is not like the Western world in terms of like the fairness or like corruption, right? China like is a little bit more not draconian, that's the wrong word for it, but like loose. In China, there are anti-corruption laws, right? They can be applied to you for basically anything that they see fit, right? Go look up the case of this major soccer league in China and how many players have been hit with gambling infringements, corruption infringements, right? Okay? It's off the fucking scales, by the way, how bad it is. I'm pretty sure there's like 100 this year and we're only in March. Right? That gives you an idea how...
I just Googled it, and in January 29th, China banned... Well, there was an article about China banning 73 people working in football for life.
Right, there we go, right? Okay, so if you're not into gambling, and I'm like, I have a gambling background, right, okay? You wouldn't... It's very hard to understand the scale, and China really has an image of wanting to crack down on this. They will crack down on this with a shotgun approach in terms of like if you were like texting or like the stuff. So let's take the famous StarCraft player Savior. Savior, I don't know if Savior was I don't know if he actually got caught specifically for match fixing any specific games, but he was courting players to match fix. That was actually his crime. Okay, I might be wrong on that. My memory is not as good, not perfect, right? In China, like, for big institutions like the government, soccer, Olympics, right? They will take like a shotgun approach and they will like clear like, you know what I mean? Take out like 80 people, 90 people of like association and they'll just slap corruption charges, right? Okay? Fairly, unfairly, you were in the same fucking room as someday, you were like somebody's like spouse in the fucking hard at the same institution. It's just a shotgun approach. That's how small the LPL is in China in comparison to like these other like big things. Like we think of like, oh, LPL in China is huge, Tencent, right? Not really. Like we aren't even got to the point of the LPL having like the Chinese government commission and stuff like coming in, and the Chinese Communist Party like coming in and like, you know, going through like all the teams. We've not even got to like that stage yet. The thing that the people need to really worried is in League of Legends, the person who's in charge of the country, Xipeng, is really doesn't hang in like video games, and he talks about it being like a component that corrupts the youth. Now we've seen some of the things that came into China. You can't be in a pro team until you're 18. Right? They really snap down on people faking their birth certificates and stuff and their ages on like teams. I know Sheer, everyone likes to meme about it, etc. But like it used to be absolute comical levels. Like Zatai went to Worlds when he was like 13 or 12 or something, right? Um, this isn't going to help that. And this can have lasting damage in terms of like match fixing is one of the things that largely contributed to fastening the decline of Brood War in Korea. These like little events, we just kind of see them. These can create like social media like shitstorms. These can create like fan disenfranchising with it. Um, and it can be like really really serious what like stuff like and the regularity in which it's happened and how like blatant now obviously the team manager from TES basically went out on a stream and said that he match fixed every game 5 and every game they lost now and he walked that statement back but that's what he went out with and how he emotionally felt, right? Imagine you're a player like 369, you know what I mean, who went out on a limb, by the way, for his new teammates and was
Yeah,
like
basically
saying,
following their elimination from playoffs, a lot of people were criticizing their jungle support. They were rookies, and 369 said, "Look, well, basically, LD rookies have to grow somewhere." And I think
yep.
particularly with the context that LDL is effectively defunct, the rookies within LPL are now developing on the fly, whereas before maybe they would have had a bit more time in LDL to mature. Not so much anymore.
And so that now, you can then see it unpacked. Like a player like T69's just lost a third, like a quarter of a year. You know what I mean? Because decisions. Will he continue to play? I hope he does. You know what I mean? This team's then gonna have to go find a new jungler. You know what I mean? Like they've lost like this time. This can make and break teams. One last little point about like the culture. I'm one of the rare people who actually watched LDL. I watched a lot of LDL for a long, long time. Um, what people need to understand about like LDL is it was basically just like a lot of not very like good players, some actually just straight up nepo babies, like people who are like have like contacts. You could probably figure out some of the nepo babies in the LPL, because they just like what I mean go from project to project to project, um, and one of the things about the LPL is you basically not only did you have to like respect your elders, right, and do what you were told and listen to managers of varying skills. Some of them could be terrible and making you a worse player, by the way, right? You also had the other problem of like you had to try and not be like, oh, you need to match fix this game. If you don't, you're not on the team. Is anyone else going to pick you up? Like you're like team, and then if you ever do match fix once, that person's got puppet strings on you for the rest of your career. You could be match fixing for your LDL coach whilst you're in the LPL. I've heard of that happening. I've heard of players, Korean players, match fixing in Korea who used to play in China.
So
That's
this
how.
is something which Clement Shu did tweet out about. So this is using his words. He tweeted in reply to someone else on Twitter. The amounts we've heard for throwing games, this is what Rich was referring to earlier, was oftentimes 10 times their monthly salary, and gambling leaders would report the players themselves if they refused to cooperate anymore, which is what Keire is talking about here. If you've been asked as a player to throw by tier 2 managers, you're kind of screwed as a player. So that's talking to both there, and that's from Clement Shu on Twitter.
And so people don't realize. So I've heard like rumors, stories, Korean players, right, coming over and doing that. When it was the solo queue gambling, I knew people, actively knew them, right, who were paying people live on stream to run down like fakers games, and they were from the Chinese region. Like they were paying failed tier 3, tier 4 Korean pros who weren't going to make it in like LCK and stuff like that. They were paying them sums of money to run down Korean. That's why all that stuff like had to like get shut down and all that. Rightfully so. Like it was an absolute disgrace what they were doing and what they were being involved in. Right. So that it is systemically it has been absolutely rife, and I do feel really sorry for a lot of the young men whose like careers were like turbo destroyed because like what financial because what people need to understand is majority of people, not all, but you need to like paint a picture. And I know you can start painting a sob story, but you've got a lot of kids who the reason they're so good at League of Legends is they have forgone their education, right, to go to a PC bang and play or PC bang or a PC like fucking community place, whatever you want to call it, right, to play League of Legends all day. They get to like, live their dream. Their mum and dads are like getting on them, saying you need to go get an education. Education is a massive part of Chinese culture, by the way, right? They spend like something like 30% of the fucking GDP on tutors, right? And they've forgone that. They've gotten good at League of Legends. You're like, okay, I'm now getting paid my first salary, right? And then your team manager's like telling you to like, you're gonna run this game down, and then maybe you do like leapfrog it up. The last thing I'll say in this, Rich, is that is like, there are actual LPL champions. Someone who has won a world champion, who, if you can go and you can go onto social media, you can literally piece it together that they have basically quite openly match fixed. It is a known thing in the community that they have match fixed, right? But because it could not be proven, which is a different degree, right? And so they were allowed to just continue to operate it. These are like, I'm not gonna. I've said it on shows before, but I'm not going to continue to propagate them anymore. Because you haven't got any evidence, so it's just fucking like thingy. But you can go and you can piece it together that it's very highly doubtful. I'm talking like multi-time LPL champions, world champions.
And this is why, like, say for someone in my position, right? Unless there is out and out proof, I'm not going to be speculating at all. So for myself, I'm not going to do that. The reason why the Nio stuff is so out there is that it's not LDL. It's very high level within LPL. And it seemingly, I mean, it's been walked back now, but Poppy did basically say the guy admitted it. That's not, you can't really, fix that. That's the only time where things get really, really crazy. Everything else, even in a shadow of a doubt, I think for a lot of people in the industry, it's like we have to leave this up to people with authority, really, because out and out proof is very, very hard to find for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and what is actually interesting as well is like I've talked about. I actually had a. Actually, I won't bring that up actually, but basically, most match fixing, quote unquote, isn't actually as extreme as this. That's what's interesting. Like when I talked about how unbelievably rife match fixing is in LPL. I think there's probably most weeks there's a level of match fixing. That does not mean most weeks people are throwing games. Usually the most common form, for a myriad of different reasons, like it's just better for being able to actively fix because it's a more controllable factor than winning or losing. It's harder to get caught. It's better for everyone, whatever. It's stuff like spot fixing, right? Like, so you will just give away the first 2 Drakes completely uncontested because that's a controllable thing, which also means that you don't necessarily lose a game. And yeah, it's much more in your hands than
just
actually
make sure you're on the wrong side of the jungle when your bot has prio.
Yeah, just change your pathing. Just go bot to top off of bad timing even just fucking trade grubs for Drake. Like you don't even have to do something bad necessarily. So yeah, there are many different ways to, and there's so many different things you can bet on now that you don't usually have to throw an actual game, which is why to me this is actually quite shocking because a lot of the, again, not names of people I would directly out, but a lot of the people that I have in my mind when I think about LPL match fixing are not people who are necessarily just openly throwing games. They're just doing random shit like placing 5 wards in 10 minutes and shit like this, like just doing random stuff that can be bet on some random website. So to see someone who is actively trying to throw a game, that is pretty crazy. And for that to be one of the confirmed cases, that is pretty nuts to me and very disturbing. And I have to say, like, above everything else, like, to me, I just feel like so fucking bad for the players on his team. Like, especially like
they were very close to first stand. Realistically, if that didn't happen, there was given how anyone's Legend bombed out, how Top Esports went to 5 games against both Weibo and JDG, there was a real world where they went to internationals, which feels awful for everyone else involved.
Yeah, and because we don't know, like, it could be the case that he just, like, threw Game 5, but that seems highly unlikely just on the basis that you don't know you're going to be at Game 5, right? So it's like it's very doubtful that someone was able to get into communication with him between Games 4 and 5 and be like, oh, by the way, you need to throw this game. Like, probably he's trying to throw the whole fucking series, but his team is doing so well in spite of him or whatever, like, holding the ship together, that they actually go all the way to Game 5, and then he has to even more egregiously in. Like, just thinking about that and imagining being a player on his team, that is just so painful to even think about. Sorry, Keire, go on.
No, just one thing. Okay. There's a really funny thing about... So, when because you're talking about spot fixing, what you need to understand is the longer a person can make a series go in terms of match fixing, this is why it's so rife in like esports, is the longer you can make a series go, the more individual outcomes you can multiplicatively bet on. gambling is based on odds. Odds, when you bring them together, multiply. So think of this. He's potentially match fixed 4 BO5s, Nymaera?
There was one 4-game series. There were so there was WE in the play-ins, and then there were 2 in playoffs, and I think the other
Right.
one was a 3-1.
So imagine they controlled every single game that he lost. So we'll say 1-3-3, right? Okay, so that's 9, right? So he lost the 9 games, and you had a 9-foot parlay on that, like a 9x, like whatever odds that is. 9 of them consecutively. So like 2.1 times 2.3 times. Think
So
of what
they lost
think,
7 games in this playoffs bracket. They went 3-2 versus WE, 2-3 versus JDG. They 3-0 WE, and then they lost 3-2 to Weibo.
Just get a quick calculator out, guys, and just do like 2 times 2, 7 times, like, you know what I mean, like 2 to the power of 7, and like just look at the number and how ridiculous that is, right? Now, obviously, that isn't what's happening, but that begins to mentally why it becomes so lucrative to have someone do this, because the financial gains, we're not just talking like tens, hundreds of thousands, which is what it usually is. You could be talking millions, like multi-millions in terms of like one individual outcome. But for these like these types of things in control, and that's why it can be so lucrative in terms of like paying the person to do so. You know what I mean? You take on, and that's where it comes from, the organized crime element of the risk, etc.
Yeah, which is why, like, when people are sat there saying, but this doesn't make any sense. What do you mean 10 times someone's monthly salary? How could that be worth it? Of course it's fucking worth it. Like, if you are making, let's just arbitrarily say 2 million from a fix, then paying this player, 200k or whatever it would be is no skin off their back at all. So, yeah, it's just... obviously something that's very disturbing to hear about. As I said, to me, like, the scale of this is almost what's most disturbing. This isn't even just the equivalent of Paul Robinson or whoever it was trying to hit the fucking TV screen from a goal kick one time. This is like full on throwing, which is, yeah.
Just to get an idea, rough ballpark figure. I just did it there. To make, if you were to say, Rich was saying there, to make 2 million, the person would have to risk still $16,000 if they wanted to make $2 million. Okay, you're going to pay the person to make sure like that they're fucking throwing those games. Like, you're going to make it an incentive for him, either financially or physically, that he's throwing those fucking games. So that's why it becomes so dark. And I actually feel sorry. You know what I mean? He's done what he's done, but hopefully, like, there isn't any other like implications for the young man himself other than the financial one. I actually think hopefully it's better that he has just been an idiot and he's just taking a financial incentives, and it's no darker than that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the other thing that is going to have people's brains spinning is like retconning now like everything they've ever seen in like the LPL or whatever, and being like, to what extent was this championship legitimate, and yada yada yada. Again, I can't know this for sure, obviously. This is just a feeling I have based on stuff that I've seen and general I guess not really much more than like my general vibes of what's happened, or the names I've seen and what they've been associated with. But for the most part, I don't feel like, many LPL finals, for example, have been match fixed. I don't think that's really particularly a thing, at least that I know of. Obviously, it could be. I'm not some fucking expert on this or something. But yeah, it is more thinking, well, in the round of 16 or something, like in the first round of playoffs or whatever, like, did someone get eliminated who could have gone on to win? Or like, that is very upsetting and disturbing to think about. But all I'm going to say is, I think Knight still would have won a bunch of championships. So I don't think the whole of LPL history is like completely altered or something. But yeah, it is kind of sad to think about the scale and the altered history that we may now sort of be living in the realized version of the present from. So yeah, it is what it is. But anyway, sticking with China, but onto hopefully more pleasant pastures. Obviously, 2 teams are representing the LPL at first stand. BLG, who beat JDG in the playoff finals. First and foremost, guys, obviously, whenever we talk about BLG, it's through the prism of how much, I guess, like the real quote-unquote BLG is this team in their current iteration. How much are they the weird pretenders can randomly disappear, are they? Obviously, from my perspective, and again, I always say I don't really watch LPL during regular season. I tend to tune in during the business end of playoffs. And, as a very much a casual in that sense, I'd sit here and be like, Bin's back, baby. Let's fucking go. This is the best BLG. What is the reality, Keire? How are BLG looking? Are they super legit? Is Bin back, or is this, you know, all just sort of an Oasis mirage at this point?
I think it's hard to say Bin's back, but for such a, in my opinion, what seems to be a confidence-led player, I think it was very refreshing to see him kind of the Gigabin came out in the finals. I think you got to see the very lane dominant, decision making dominant, team fight dominant, like basically like player. You know, who one of the specialities of Ben, not the specialities of Ben, is he will effectively play a weak side situation and win out 2v1, and min max out 2v1 positions, um, through like great side laning, lane tactics, matchup understanding. He looked so much more comfortable in this BO5 than basically any period I've seen him in the past 2 years. That it was literally like, and it's hard to say, is this a flash in the pan? But you know, for such a, for me, a confidence-led player, I hope this is the beginning of the turning form. I know me and like Thorn have like talked about it, and it was something I don't think he received enough criticism for in terms of like how much Ben was affected by um Fearless. You know what I mean? It was like Fearless came along and the early losses in winter, and he had just lost Worlds, and it was like this fucking all this momentum, and it was like he just could never find his footing. And this season didn't look that great either. But supposedly there being this big, massive break between LPL regular season and playoffs. Supposedly BLG were like incredible in the time in between, and supposedly Ben was like super dedicated. I went and looked up, and it's the most solo queue I'd been seeing. Like I remember I was on the show last year, and I was talking about like Ben was in Masters or something with like 70 games. That's like fucking unheard of, by the way, from him. And you know what I mean? Like what a difference. I was very impressed, and I think did he get Finals MVP now?
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah, he was the
Yeah,
finals MVP, deservedly
yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was 100% the Finals MVP, and yeah, he was very impressive.
Jin was pretty good as well. Was
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
yeah, surprised to see, because again, it's like the weird thing with, I feel like a lot of LPL players, maybe even more so than in Europe. It feels like, I guess, barring someone like Broken Blade, who I'd say would be like an outlier in this sense, is usually players are either trending upwards or trending down. They're not particularly roller coastery. It does feel like in LPL that you just players
There's a
just
lot of roller
randomly.
coasters, yeah.
It's like one week we're talking about Jun is a disgrace and should be kicked for whoever's on the bench. The next week he's like the best jungler or one of the best junglers in LPL. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of wild. But yeah, Nymaera, what are your
Well,
thoughts
that's why
on
you
BLG?
gotta know your people, right? You gotta know them in LPL because actually a lot of the time there are underlying causes to that streakiness, and then things go up and down. In fact, for instance, I think that JDG on the other side, we'll definitely have a talk about a lot of the players and what's scaffolding them, and when those scaffolds are taken away, how different do they look? BLG heading in towards first stand are going to be a very different team from JDG. I still think a lot of their flaws still exist. I think if you look at Game 3 in that finals, you'll notice that they still weren't very coordinated in difficult 5v5s. The Game 5 was the Renekton into the Kog'Maw Lulu. We saw a Kog'Maw in LPL finals, which was really cool, and I'm glad that we get to see a little bit of that. The only way you play out that game is that if everyone goes in, and it's a difficult thing to do, I'll say this first, right? But everyone goes in at the same time because there's only one polymorph. Vampire came away from that game looking really good because he just clicked just clicked polymorph on the Renekton who stood just in front of him. And that's all they had to do, because Bin, in that game, was not coordinated with the rest of his team very well, and that was the difference there. The main feeling I got from BLG walking away from that finals, and one thing which kind of I think that Tabe has a lot to answer for from that finals, was BLG got to play their game, and JDG bought into it. And I think that made BLG look really good, where BLG are at their best when they can play through bursty skirmishes with a lot of mobility a lot of the time. Typically, in regular season, that was led by Shun and Knight on burst combos, so things like, Vi combos or, Wukong. They had stuff like Rise Kiana in the back pocket as well. That was typically how they did very well. You need Knight and Shun on stuff like Pantheon as well. Pantheon's been huge for them because they're very, very good synergistically. You know that if one of them's on the same screen as the other one, they can make something happen. That's probably been the most consistent part. It's not been, Viper on 2v2. That's been quite sporadic, actually. It's not actually been Bin. In terms of him being able to translate gold leads. Finals was very different though, because as Keire was saying, it's the most comfortable that he's been in actually taking gold lead and then winning with it. That's been the difference maker, because Bin has the most resources given to him of any LPL top laner. Shun will path up there more than most people do. It's not like a hard and fast rule, but BLG are more likely to play to top lane than anything else. And you look at like game 4 of that finals, and like him just getting ahead of a matchup he should be losing in, the Gwen versus Zahen, completely flips things. So BLG, they do definitely play very much for individual excellence, about 2v2 combos, 3v3s maybe, but less so the 5v5s. You know, one thing which I said pretty early on into this year was that BLG were no longer the best team fighting team in the LPL, and I actually think that's remained fairly true, though I will say in finals they were better at that. However, I did walk away from it feeling like JDG gave the first 2 games of the series to BLG for free, where they just bought into this no frontline scrappy skirmish comp, and you didn't really get to see the best of JDG, and you didn't get to see BLG pulled into late game front to back 5v5s with heavy tank team compositions, because they do struggle with that, and that'll be something to track coming into this event. Trying to think what else there is for BLG, really. I suppose we can talk about Viper and On. I think On domestically probably been the best support in the region again. Actually,
let me come through here with
okay.
the night agenda, right? Okay, it was actually a very pedestrian final. It was
Yep.
it was probably one of Knight's worst, and I say worst. He was good. He was like 6, 7 out of 10, right? Okay, he was in no way bad, right? The only thing I'm going to say is he fucking manhandled Hongkyu in lane, man. Oh my god!
He gave up
did
a
he
free
get
solo kill, but besides
Yeah.
that, like he decked him. Yeah.
Oh, bro, it was. That's what I'm saying. It was like, oh my god. I was like, it was like the wrath of God. But outside of that, it was actually a very pedestrian final, which is refreshing to see. Not in the sense of like, oh, Knight is like the best player in the world. I don't think he is. But I mean in the sense of like, he does not have to play like a 9 out of 10 League of Legends on a super team, right, to win a championship, which should not be the standard of being on like a super team, and it has not been the standard for anyone. It seems but like Chovy and Knight at times that will like uphold that to. But I think it was really nice to see. The other like one thing I will say about it is, I think it's going to be very cool going into first stand, is we are Knight is one of the people least affected by FEARX in terms of like
If anything, it helps him because it removes like the super powerful stuff like the Azir when it's meta, and it's like, okay, I only have to deal with that for one game.
or just just give away a game as BLG and just have Knight play it for some strange reason.
That was very
Like,
frustrating to watch this season. Yeah.
Don't worry, guys. It's like we're gonna the best tally player in the world. Nah, we're gonna pick him. He's 5 or 6 out of 10 Azir. But no, actually, it was not 6 out of 10. It was sometimes 4 out of 10 some games this year. But the other thing that I would really like to like highlight here is the non-shared champion pool between him and Chovy. Obviously, when you go to first stand, the teams that BLG is looking to beat, Knight obviously has like the Syndra, and he has the Ziggs, and he's shown now the Mel that he wanted to play. And by the way, he performed quite well on the Mel, outside of like the fact that the composition fell to pieces. Great Olaf pick from Tabe, you know.
That was in the upper bracket finals, not the finals itself.
Oh, sorry,
yes.
not the finals, but yeah. There's a lot of like not shared and some shared, so I think it's going to make for a really
he actually beat Honky's Mel in the finals with the Syndra mid lane. That was fun.
Syndra mid lane, yes. So look, he's in a good position going into first stand. I think he's very easily the second best mid laner, probably a top 5 player, top 4, very conservatively going into the tournament. But I think there's a very clear difference between him and Chovy going into this. Like, this is bigger than the difference between Knight and Chovy is bigger than it was going into MSI 2024, and Chovy was really good at that tournament.
I don't think it's as big as them because Chovy was like he would just win the game by himself. I actually don't
Knight was the
know on
Knight was the MVP of the LPL that year, and bro, he was
Yeah, no,
pretty
it's more
fucking
just the case
prized.
that I feel like Chovy's been a little bit more mortal. It's not like he's bad. He's still the best like LCK mid laner. It's just like
Fair
I
enough.
don't
That's
see
interesting.
him I don't see him winning games through just individual lane lead where it's unplayable for absolutely like that kind of level of because just so we're clear, like the MSI 24 difference between them, Chovy was probably ahead of the game further than anyone else has been ahead of their respective role in the modern era. I can't think of the last time someone was that far ahead of role, especially to the point where it actually wins you games, you know. But I suppose rounding up BLG as a whole, the way that I see them is very bursty, very skirmishy. They get ahead, they stay ahead. The way that they lose is you drag them into slower games around objectives and 5v5 front to back with tanks. That's the big thing. They're not actually that great at dealing with very disruptive tank front lines, which is why the only game they lost in finals was against, you know, like a Scion Cogmore composition. That's the kind of thing they struggle against. So that's the kind of thing you're going to have to track. How well would they be able to deal with teams which do just play front to back against them? How good are they going to be against the other early jungle, kind of early skirmishing teams? Because I think we do have two classes of teams at this tournament. We have the ones which are very, very much about early game snowball, like G2 with Skimond. I think like if they go up against BLG, that'll be a really interesting matchup. And then you have teams like GENG and JDG who are much more about 5v5 really organized front to back. So of course GENG can do both, right? But that's vaguely how I see both sides of the spectrum at this tournament.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about their Chinese counterparts that they played in the final, JDG. Obviously, going in, they're not going to be probably as favoured as BLG, although we'll talk about exactly how favoured or not favoured they are when we talk about Korea, I guess, as well. But yeah, in terms of JDG, what do you think, Keire, would be a good result for this team? Maybe not even a good showing is a better way to put it, so we're not too
Oh,
results based.
like a deep series and semi-finals. Deep, like that's a good showing. Deep series and semi-finals that they lose. I think they can make the finals. I think they can make finals. Because it's not that hard to draw the other Korean. Let me check it before I mince my words.
What,
Let me just check the
BFX?
bracket. Yeah. 1 second.
So they're playing against GENG in the groups, and then it depends on who comes out of the other one, right? Because you've got BLG, BFX on the other side of it.
So they would get the
Yeah.
other. No, they would get the lower bracket team, and yeah, no, they can make the final because they would get the if they no, they would be the lower bracket team. So they could then get drawn BLG. Could they beat BLG? It's not that crazy. They're not favored. Like they're like 30% chance to make. They're like a 30% chance to make the finals. But a good showing in the semi-finals, like deep series in the semi-finals, I think they'd be happy. If they don't make the knockout stage, that's where because potentially what could happen is they lose to Gen G and then they lose to Lions.
Yes.
Okay.
I am
Right.
actually quite worried about this
Because
folks, JDG stands for
yes.
Junja Dice Gaming.
Yes.
It is all about this. Look, Junja might not always be JDG's best player, but he is always their most important player. If
Yeah.
Junja is not in the game, this team falls the fuck to pieces. They are not good when Junja is not calling the shots from ahead. They have some veterancy in the team when you look at Gala, because Gala's been around for a while. Gala is not the leader of a team. I know technically he's the team captain, but he's not the guy who's going to like pick this team up with a scruff of the neck and saying, okay, we're doing this next. And Vampire is still fairly rookie support. This is his first time international, and he is also a notoriously inconsistent player. Well, actually, I think he had a very good playoffs. There is always that worry of, well, okay, if Junja falls behind, I do not trust anyone else on this team to pick up the slack. So if you come up against a really good early game jungler, I wonder who that could be from the North American region right now, then that does raise an actual threat for this team, despite the fact on paper they're a very good set of individuals.
Another narrative point, Junja, famous international choker. Now, he did get over it a little bit at Worlds because he made the quarterfinals to lose to KT, right? But he is infamous for fucking losing the plot at internationals. Like, to a degree, like, the people that he has lost to and the games that he has lost at internationals, like through his own, not he played well and his team just ended up losing, that he has actually fucking like thrown through, like, you know what I mean, they start an objective and he just doesn't smite, or he passes incorrectly, or he's in the mid, he's got two losing lanes and he takes a fucking 1v3 duel with a support mid laner and the other jungler. Like, bro, like the games Junja has lost just from like, I hate calling them chokes because you don't know the person, but you know what I mean. They just look terrible aesthetically. That I've got concerns there, but that's more of a narrative thing.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk a bit about Korea then, and framing it a little bit for people who haven't watched LCK, maybe tend to just watch them in the internationals. Let's start with GENG. What sort of version of GENG is this? Obviously, again, from a casual perspective, you see them as, well, they're all conquering over there in Korea, aren't they? But sometimes they come up short, sometimes they're amazing. MSI, great. Worlds, not so much. Whatever. What version, Keire, are we getting of GENG? When you compare this GENG team to previous international iterations or going into those international tournaments, how good is this version of GENG? How much has Doro come along? Yeah, what do you think?
This is the best version of GENG in the context of the field that they're against. As in, like, them versus this field, they're the furthest ahead. But
Biggest
that is
delta.
it's not the biggest delta, but it's not the best version of GENG. I actually think the best version of GENG was probably the one going into Worlds last year. Last year. They were maybe more favoured in other years, but yeah. They're going to be really hard to beat. It's all BO5s, so there's no BO3 sniping. You've got to remember that. First Stand is an actual real format, like designed by human beings with brains. Um, I'm very impressed, but I'm quite happy with it.
Just very quickly before
Yes.
you go on, but
Oh, you go.
maybe people will be slightly confused, just in the sense that obviously this is the same lineup from last year, but
Uh-huh.
Duro's no longer a rookie. Like, why aren't they in your mind quite as good? Surely, if anything, with longer together, more cohesiveness, second year of Fearless, a rookie support who's no longer a rookie support. Why aren't they quite as good as they were last year? Maybe.
So what's really funny is, okay, so last year, I don't think Chove is as good in the context of the team like this year, and I think having the ability to both be the best systematic team and then the team with the best star power at MSI 2025, Game 5 versus T1 in the finals, GENG do not play like a better systematic game. Chovy just takes over the series. Chovy just on Aurora, just star player power takes control of the series. He just is the best player in the server. Like, GENG make lots of mistakes that he just bails them out of. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean. That double threat was dangerous. I think the team maybe systematically is better, but there's the star power threat. Maybe in individual play, Keen's a bit better. I would say Canyon is definitely better.
Yeah,
You have
Canyon
to
was
trade.
like the weak link last year, and he's
Yeah.
actually much more consistent. And Keen is Keen. What can I say? He's had like 3 years of being consistently best top laner in the world on everything you can put him on. It's fucking ridiculous.
Ruler, however, I think is worse in context. I think Ruler isn't as good. I put it this way: going in, I don't think Ruler. I could say for certain, Ruler is better than Viper. He's just an ADC playing with a better team. He obviously Ruler is arguably the best ADC of all time, but he is benefiting a lot from being on GENG on a systems team and just playing the ADC. You have Duro, Keen, Canyon, Chove. You know what I mean? Team fights are very clean. You know what I mean? GENG set the game up, right? So have I seen the really crisp knife edge execution from Ruler? I've seen him make unforced errors. Plenty of them. Is he still a great player? I think he's easily one of the two best ADCs going into this tournament. I think Viper made lots of mistakes, by the way, in the regular season of the LPL, but going into this tournament, I think Viper might be a little bit sharper on his individual. portion of it.
Yeah, it's more like I think that Viper doesn't always know when to be at a play-in time yet. There was like a pretty bad early game where he was on Ezreal, and he just wasn't in the right position for the fight. The fight starts, and like clearly they were calling for the fight. Ezreal was not in the right position, and they lost from that. There were a couple of moments like that, but it's not like Viper was bad, and he has been ramping up, and we're starting to see the point where actually like Viper and On in a 2v2, if they're given just a competitive matchup, they just deck people, and it does become a pretty much auto lose scenario.
Yeah, I mean, Nymaera, what are you? Oh, sorry. Go on.
No. Like I was just finishing like my point. So like yeah, like just say like talking about it there. I think that's why, even though the team might be like worse and with Duro, you've got to understand of like Duro, even as a support player, but the solo lanes of GENG set the tempo of the game. They are actually a team that doesn't really need their jungle support to be as crazy because the solo lanes are just so like they've got a cheat code. They've got Keane and Chovy as their fucking solo lanes, right? And people could just
it's
fucking
not really
do
fair.
like people could just do I'm pretty sure Canyon does fucking tons of illegal shit, by the way, like actual straight up criminal stuff. He just has Keane and Chovy as his laners and they're just doing miracles.
Yeah. Obviously, GENG in pretty much everyone's mind, Nymaera, go into this tournament as a pretty strong favourite. So how do you feel about GENG, and do you think any of these teams, especially the teams we've maybe already talked about, can do anything to this GENG team?
I think there are teams that can upset them in early game. I just don't think that... Okay, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to see into the future. Games are going to go like this. BLG go up against GENG. They're going to play for early lanes. They're going to play for 2v2 skirmishes, fighting around side lanes, and they're going to get ahead of the game. They are good enough to get ahead of GENG, especially in a best of 5. I'm sure we'll see this. And then they're going to make a single mistake, and the whole game will completely fall apart. I don't think any team at this tournament is good enough at both early game and then also closing out those early game leads to make sure that GENG are genuinely dead and buried in the game. And I think that's going to be the big problem for any team at this tournament, is getting ahead and staying ahead. I actually think that JDG maybe have one of the better ways to deal with them, in the fact that they can just draft for hyper late game scaling, because Tabe has... instilled that 5v5 team fighting. But then the problem is, I don't think JDG are as good team fighters as GENG, because basically no one is. JDG are very good at drafting towards that. And I think they're going to run into issues in solo lanes, where Hongq against Chovy was actually fine last year. But I don't think that Xiaoshu, even though I think he's had a very good year and a half, and it's his first time going international, I just don't think he's going to be able to hold a candle to Keane. I think Keane is just going to absolutely deck him in both lane and in team fights. So I don't think anyone has the full puzzle completed for GENG. Now, the only caveats to this are maybe there's a massive meta shift. Chovy has to play stuff like Annie, and he can't control the game in the same way. Bot lane doesn't know matchups or something like that. And it takes a little while for GENG to self-right. I don't think even then, though, I don't see GENG losing a series. I just don't see them doing it. If it was going to happen, it might be like a couple of games in the first series. I mean, maximum it goes to is a game 5 in an early series, maybe against JDG, because JDG have a better meta read. But it is really their tournament to lose, because I just don't think anyone has the full picture.
Fair enough. I guess every tournament pretty much they go into is GENG's to lose, though, and that seems to have happened quite a bit.
But they do that at Worlds, right? But that's it. I mean, they slaughter. Realistically, they only got knocked out in a game 5 by HLE with like on form Delight, Zeus, Zeka, right, in last year's LCK Cup, and then you have Worlds stuff happened. But besides that, I mean, they just deck the rest of the year pretty much. It's very rare that they drop things. The level of dominance they have is unprecedented.
You here's something crazy, Rich. This will actual fry your noodle, right? Over the last, I think from 2023, or is it 2023 or is it 2024? So the last like 3 years, right? Chovy has lost something like 5 BO5s, right? The problem was it's like 4 of them were at Worlds.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like that, he lost 1 BO5 at MSI, or like 2 MSI or something. You know what I mean? Some combination like that, right? of like,
Yeah,
you know, of just
23 he lost to BLG and wait, was it BLG? He lost to BLG. I can't actually remember if yeah, we had BLG, but we didn't have JDG at that time, so it might have been BLG twice actually.
It was something bonkers, like 35 to like 5 or something in like BO5s, okay, over the period, right? It's just like obviously you lose the big ones, you know what I mean? You lose the ones at Worlds are like absolutely crippling. Meanwhile, like as I was memeing when you were doing your career section, Rich,
Oh,
where
Genji
is
lost to
T1?
T1 and then T1 then BLG at MSI 23. That was the
Rich, where is T1? Where is the world champions, Rich?
I mean,
Why are they not in first stand?
just sandbagging, obviously. They didn't want to be there, did they?
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, speaking of which, obviously, FEARX are representing Korea against all odds and fan predictions and so on. Probably a team, I think it's fair to say, that a lot of our viewers won't necessarily know too much about. So maybe, Nymaera, you can give me sort of your mini breakdown of like, what is this team? Who are the players to look out for? How and why are they at this tournament? How did they get there?
Sorry, was that for BFX? I missed
it.
it.
Yeah, for FEARX. For FEARX.
So FEARX are a team which haven't gone international before, unless you count the Asian Invitational of last year.
Which, of course, I do.
Of course I do. The God Guo Invitational, which was famously an off-season tournament predicted by Grasshopper, the most prestigious of all things. The big thing about BFX is that they have this absolute hellion of an AD carry who has come out of, I'm going to say, come out of nowhere in the loose term of it, right? And has put himself on the shortlist for best AD carry in the world, coming out as a rookie last year in Diablo. And I thought it was the most important thing they could have done in the offseason was keep this AD carry. There was a crazy amount of interest in him, but I think actually what really helped them was the fact that Viper was leaving HLE, Guma was leaving T1. There were a lot of, and Pays was coming back from China as well. So there were a bunch of big AD carries on the market, which somehow meant that Diablo managed to stay on BFX amongst the chaos. That is so crucially important because this guy is absolute gold dust. A couple of things have really helped BFX come up to prominence. One of the biggest things was the support meta going into Enchanter meta, which really helps Diablo have agency. If you have Enchanters, AD carries have agency. But Kellen is a much better Enchanter player than he is an Engage player. And I think that when you're in a region with players like, well, you know, Delight, Duro, Keire, having a support that can actually hold his own versus them, whether that's in lane or later on into impact in the game as well, you can't really be a top player, a top team within LCK without having a jungle support that can hold your own versus the best of them. And that's actually why HLE was so relevant for such a long time too, was actually because they had Peanut and Delight on such good form. Of course, Delight fell off. Keire had a bit of a wobble right at the very end as well, and Kellen got in some real comfort, which meant that BFX had this AD carry that could really benefit from the meta, and Kellen, who was actually in a very comfortable spot, despite the fact that I think that Kellen was not that high. Well, he was okay, but I don't think people like highly rated him before.
Well, at least we forget. I mean, I said at the time that I was really surprised when it happened, but for a lot of people, they were going, "Oh, it makes sense." I remember when Kellen got benched for what's he called? The guy who played Rel all the time.
Well, Moham, or is it Moham?
Yeah, when he got benched for Moham, I was like, to me, Kellen was pretty good. Like when he got benched, I always remember that being like one of the more, to me at least, one of the more weird benches. It was Moham, by the way, one of the more weird benchings at the time. Thinking this guy, I remember at the start of that year, he was unironically, his name was being like not shoved to the top of lists or whatever, but when we talked about who are the better performing supports in the LCK, his name was actually there early last year, or maybe it was even 2024 when he got benched from him. I can't remember. Anyway, so I was very surprised when he sort of disappeared for a while. So I'm happy to see him back anyway, because I always thought he was one of the better ones.
And that's coincided with some really important stuff. Now, Vikla, a player you might know who was on FlyQuest for a bit. He was on KT Rolster in 2022. That's when he kind of came up and started to make waves as well. So in 22, he was on KT Rolster, went over to FlyQuest in, 23, and then bombed out there, made his way back over to LCK. He, I think, peaked as being a top 5 mid laner in the world this split. He's genuinely found some real comfort. He solo killed Chovy. Did he win the game? No, but he solo killed Chovy, which is no mean feat. I think that he's had a good amount of playmakers in the meta for him. He's a big playmaker on stuff like Ari, Akali, Sylas, these champions which can be very mobile, bring out large amounts of CC and burst damage on a short notice kind of rotation. He's been really good at that. And he pairs up with, I think, maybe second most important player on the team actually behind Diablo in Raptor. I think Raptor has been fucking great. I think Raptor has also peaked at just the perfect time. He's been very controlling. I've liked the way that he's played playmakers alongside Vikla, stuff like the Vi. I mean, every jungler's kind of got to play Vi at this point, right? But Raptor had some awesome plays across this split. Clear's a player I think has been, for me, he's been more holding his own. He has had some bright moments too. And I do think if this team is going to take some hits, it's probably going to be in solo laners because I don't think the consistency is completely there. While I'm talking about these peaks, we did see Vikla have some very good and very bad Galio games where like he's just all-inning on the wrong target. I mean, this team did go, this team like won a game 5 versus Pioshik Rammus, right? Well, that was the game which they won, I believe it was. Was that the series which that went to the game 5 with the Rammus?
DNS was
yeah.
something special.
So
like
BFX have had a lot of things converging at once, and I think it really helps that jungle supports in a comfort meta with enchanters that can buff up one of the best AD carries in the world. Now, I do think that that really helped them get game plans and game wins over T1 and D plus Keire. I didn't expect them to be this event. Obviously, I thought that T1 fumbled a generational meta read for themselves, it felt like, at the start of playoffs and the end of regular season. They're going to have to be absolutely kicking themselves for that. But yeah, BFX, you've got first time international for Diablo for him, which is going to be really important that he lives up to it. Hyped AD carries, if they start kind of like really threading the needle, is going to be a very big difference in play. But they're a very good scrappy team. I think that if they get Diablo on the board on something like Nymaera, this team is a huge, huge threat.
Yeah. What do you think, Keire? Do you think this team could do anything while they're at this tournament? Obviously, we're surprised they got here, but can they do any damage? Yeah, can they beat BLG? Can they win a series against GENG? Are these things possible, or are they just sort of pipe dreamish?
Let me think. How's best to frame this? The thing is, the Raptor, people talk that it's so weird because Keire has produced probably the best junglers of all time. Many of the great system junglers. Bengi.
Best
like that one, not bad, eh? I guess, you know the names, right? But they've also created the God Flippers. People who could... They just... Fish lips. Fucking... Even Thingy had a bit of that in them. Insect. You know what I mean? They just loved to be overly aggressive, force you to make decisions, and you're annoying. Raptor is off that bloodline. You know what I mean? He's of that lineage. A good player to have when you're an underdog. A terrible player to have when you're like a perennial like champion and trying to build something consistent. I was basically agree entirely with Nymaera. Solo laners to like let them down. A bit of lack of like coordination and the meta like coming round from them. I think it's a really hard tournament for Diablo to solo carry. No jokes aside, all jokes aside, I actually would have preferred T1 to be here. Not even just like for viewership, as an actual team. They have earned their position, by the way. I'm not saying BFX, but at internationals, T1 do seem to like have like a gear that I don't think. Maybe BFX are on every other day except an international are better than them. But at internationals, T1s can tend to turn it on. But I mean, I always say they can turn it on. That doesn't mean they win it. But you go watch T1 at MSI. They took GENG all the way to game 5. They could have won. They could have won that MSI. You know, imagine the narrative last year if T1 had won MSI and World. You know what I mean? It's completely different. So I think there's a lot to consider and unpack.
By the way, the irony is for 90% of people, it's actually not completely different anyway, Keire, because Worlds is the only thing that matters. So it's what it is.
Yeah, I know. But like, so you've really got to consider once again, the world champion isn't at first stand, so that's now twice. T1 hasn't went to first stand. The only trophy that Faker doesn't have That's a Riot official trophy.
Whoa, he doesn't have Asian Invitational either, of course. BFX got there
Right,
first.
Mate, he hasn't even got an LEC title yet. Like, what are we talking about
mate,
here? Like, come on.
Knight has
easy.
denied them Rift Rivals, mate. That's all I'm gonna say. When they called Knight Echo, the wrath was swift. You know what I mean? On 200 ping. I'm jesting, of course. So yeah, I think this team's somewhat like happy to be here. Great learning experience. Great opportunity for Diabo to put himself in the shop window. For like big career bucks. But yeah, I think they'll struggle. I think they can lose to 5 teams at this tournament. I think they could lose to GENG, JDG, Lions, G2, 4 teams. I've miscounted.
Ooh, the thing about G2 is that it all comes down to Skewmond in that one. Okay, let's be honest, that's probably getting most of G2 stuff.
That sounds like a pretty good win con to me, by the way.
My worry for both LYON and G2, and I know we'll probably talk about, I don't know how much we're going to talk about each individual team, right? But my worry is I think that their 2v2s is their weakest part of their gameplay. I think that Hansam and Labrov are weak in lane, and I think that Isles is the worst player on LYON, and I think that if he has a poor show in lane, I think that duos like Gala Vampire, Diablo Kellen, Viper On, Ruladiro, it's basically unwinnable if you can't hold your own in the 2v2. It's the, I'll borrow a phrase from Sam, you have to be this mechanically tall to ride the international roller coaster. And I think now, because of the changes from meta last year to this one with the removal of lane swaps and Enchanter meta stuff like Ezreal Karma, Ashe Seraphine, Corki Nami being just so hyper lane dominant, if you get blasted in 2v2, the whole game dissolves. Just so many teams will just win off of a winning 2v2. And that's my worry for a lot of things. So I'm actually slightly more positive on BFX because I think that Diablo Kellen, they are more likely to get that leg over. The problem is, if first time international stuff for Diablo starts to get to him.
I think they're the 3rd best team at this tournament, but can lose 2 down, right? I think they're quite safely the 3rd best team at this tournament. I think they could easily it can easily be an all-Korean final as well. I think they could beat BLG. The problem is, they've got to get their mid laner through Knight. That's hellish. That is actually hellish, by the way. Like, I just don't really see it. Like, I know people will like quote like how he played against like Chove, but they're very different like players. Like there's actually some players who are worse, who perform like better because it's like all to do with like your tendencies and like what you can exploit. The worst
Shanks was probably better against Chove than Knight was actually, but I don't think that Shanks was the better player than Knight.
Like, I'm not saying this. Sometimes the worse you are, I think sometimes the worse the matchup is that, like, for you to be playing Knight compared to Chove, in terms of like Knight will just start disrespecting you. I think that can actually be worse.
Who was the coach that said like basically when you play against T1 they violate your human rights if you're not good enough? I was like, was that a Danny thing or a CV Max thing? It was one of the two.
No, I think it was Danny.
What I do is like, yeah, if you play against certain teams, they just like even though technically, quote unquote, they might not be like Genji might play a cleaner systems game. Someone like Knight, if he gets ahead of you, like I would really suggest people watch the first week or 2 of his regular season. There was a Syndra game where like he just gets 1 kill in lane, then just like solo kills everyone on the map in the space of like 5 minutes. Just walks out of lane and kills like 3 people. I'm like, okay, that's Knight.
Rich, I've got one. Have you watched BFX?
A bit, yeah, in playoffs.
Okay. You've watched loads of Korean teams over the years, right? You've seen the KTs, you've seen the Samsungs, you've seen all the stuff, right? Okay, you as an outsider, probably less biased than me. What do you think of BFX? I'm interested. What do you think of them?
I would be very surprised if they did anything. I think one of the issues here is when I say anything, by the way, what I mean is like being in true contention for winning.
Yeah,
I think Diablo is really, really good, but in their first international tournament in the best of 5 against the team that matters, do I think he is going to be the heavy win con against either like Ruler, who's obviously his team has a whole bunch of other separate win cons, which is problematic, or Viper? No, I do not. I don't even think he's favored in those 2v2s.
Exactly, that's the problem.
So it's like,
Yeah.
then I have to go outside of bot lane. So I'm like, okay, so now I'm thinking of win cons outside of bot lane. Mid doesn't sound that fun when Knight and Chovy are going to be the primary contenders for that role. Okay, I'll go to top lane. That's their weakest link, I would say. So I'm probably not going to win through clear, am I? Like, is that my win condition? And I know that, like, League of Legends is not a game of just isolating lanes and matchups and being like, therefore they cannot win. You can be greater than the sum of your parts. You know, you can win through various support jungle systems. It doesn't have to be my jungler is better than your jungler. But I do think when you look at it, there's no real reason to say, yeah, they can win. And I actually, by the way, like, I think Raptor is good. I'm not like mega high on him. I actually think like the T1 series, for example, to me, I don't want to call it like fake data because that would be like so unfair. But like there were just some weird games in those Korean playoffs. Like
He just flipped like 2 games into owner, by the way, right? And he
like,
won.
Yeah,
he literally flipped 2 games.
Yeah, the whole time I'm watching, like, especially in the T1 series, I'm just looking at things. I'm like, how replicable is this? Like, I don't know. Like,
Korea just has like a mayor and like,
yeah, like exactly. Like, there's just like T1 get their belly tickled. It's like, okay, like Raptors.
By the way, just quickly on that, like, it is actually, I'm not sure if people talked about this enough. It's actually kind of incredible that T1 aren't at first stand, given how good they were looking in regular.
Yeah, no, but
it's genuinely crazy to me.
It's like they did beat T1. That is a thing that happened. Yeah. But when you watch the series, you are kind of half the time just like, what am I watching?
It is a bit inexplicable. This is the funny thing. Like T1, it's going to be hard for the average fan that's going to fry your noodle. T1 might actually have some of the worst star power of when their like synergies and stuff like fall apart. The ability of that team for the individual carries to like take control of the game, it might be the worst. In terms of like Doran, Faker, Pays, Owner, their actual carry players, their ability to just be like, okay, I'm going to be the best player in this server and I'm going to 1v9 the whole game, right? I actually think T1's like a top 4 team in the world, but of the top 4, they might be the worst in that regard, and they have been, by the way. That's what's so beautiful about T1, is they're a pure team play team. It's the synergy between Faker, Owner, Guma, Keire, and then whoever the fuck they've got top lane. Got you, Darren. But in terms of like the actual star power, I think it's like lacking. I think it actually really hurt them in that series versus BFX. And I think you've seen other series that's like hurt them in the past as well. You know, when they went game 5 before they won the World Champions, they went fucking 5 games versus KT, by the way, in the regionals, because BDD was just the best player in the server for 3 games.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, like, one of the reasons I've been so high on BDD recently, and why I actually think, in totality, even though I give the nod to Chovy for last year to being, like, the best mid laner in the world or whatever, I think it's fucking close, by the way. Like, actually way closer than most people would have it. I think BDD was unbelievable. But not just unbelievable, like, he was oh, okay, my teammates haven't shown up, I'm just going to 1v9 anyway. And I think there's, like, very few players in the world who have the ability to think that and then do it afterwards. And yeah, as you said, like, to be fair, unironically, in like the last however long, he's got such a weird career and ups and downs that it's hard to like just say 18 months or whatever. But Faker does every now and then. You're just like, oh well, Faker's randomly just like playing really well again.
Yeah,
but he doesn't.
Bro, it's spring.
Yeah, but
yeah.
But he doesn't do it like regularly enough, or when you can't rely on it as a superpower. It's like, in fact, what usually happens is we sit back and we're like, you know what's kind of crazy? T1 aren't playing that well, but Faker's playing unbelievably. But it's almost like a surprise. Not because he's not amazing, but because he doesn't typically consistently assume the I am going to carry you role. Whereas when Chovy does it, or BDD does it, or Knight does it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That's like what I expected to happen. It's just to what level, but you always expect them to be at least an 8 from like a carry perspective. Whereas sometimes Faker's a fucking support player playing mid. Like, he just is sometimes. So yeah, it's just like a very different thing. And yeah, because T1 has for the last, honestly, like 4 years been a sum of their parts team. Even when Zeus was like vying for like best player in the world, they were still a sum of their parts team, more than other teams. So yeah, for me, I actually think, I don't know if, don't let me misquote you, Nymaera, but if you hinted that maybe G2, I actually do think G2 could beat them, by the way. I'm not saying they'd be favoured at all, but I actually think Skewmon, I'll go 38%.
So 40. So you think like basically slightly more every 3 times they play, G2 is favoured more than slightly to win one of them.
I think if they played 3 series, that G2 would be odds on to win one of those series.
Really
Yeah.
depends on meta read. Like,
Of course,
because
of course.
like I'm really worried about. In some ways, G2 are kind of BLG light in the sense that they have to get ahead early, stay ahead. But if it gets into like difficult late games, they don't always know what to do. But they're not in the same way, right? Because they're so led by Skumon, and Skumon is by far their most important player. So actually, I guess you could make some kind of comment towards Junja, I suppose, in that sense. At that point, analogies start to fall apart. I mean, the thing about G2,
No,
which
keep going,
really
Dan. Keep going. You're doing well. Keep going.
the thing which really worries me about G2 at this is that the bot lane laning phase has just not been it. It's just not been it, and that will get them killed at this tournament.
Oh,
like,
for
you
sure.
can't escape that anymore. I think that their solo laners, actually, on a good enough day, can actually cause some issues.
Well,
for instance,
that's the math, isn't it? That's the math, isn't it? It's like Clear is not going to expose BB, most likely. At least not violently.
He did to Shiwu, in fairness.
Bro, all I'm going to say is mate, fucking Brazil sends a regard, BB. Like, the dagger, fucking...
Yeah. But, in theory, Clear is not going to, like, mega expose BB. Skumon, like, as I said, I like Raptor. I think he's a good player. I think Skumon's unbelievable. I actually think they have the better jungler. And I think Caps, even though Caps is all fucking over the place, obviously when last seen in action, there are still elements of Caps that still exist, and I think he's still a very good player. Like, I feel like I think G2's top side, when last seen in action, is pretty good. Again, by the way, I'm not saying they're going to win. I would pick FEARX, but...
Skumon and Inspired are the second and third best junglers at this tournament. Skumon's the second best jungler at this tournament.
It
goes Canyon, Skumon, Inspired, Jun.
Jun, yeah.
The problem I have is that while I think individually they are better at getting more out of pathing than Shun is way better at combos. Like, I prefer Shun Bin. I prefer Shun Knight over Skumon BB Scheme.
Well, yeah, so do I, because you've added Knight to the equation. Like, come on.
No, but how many pairs? I get what he means in terms of how he plays on his like specific lane. Here's the thing: what I think Inspired and Skumon do in their teams is borderline miraculous. Like, I actually think it's like
they managed to get blood from a stone somehow. Yeah,
right.
It's kind of crazy.
Actually, to Nymaera's point, by the way, I actually don't think Skumon Caps is like a good jungle mid, particularly. Like, in terms of how they actually interact, I don't think they're like some all-time Western duo like that. I think Caps obviously is Caps, and there's still much of Caps still exists with inside him, sure, as a mid laner. Skumon, I think right now is like playing at an unbelievable level. But you don't sit there and go, Skumon and Caps are going to run the show. Even in Europe, mate, you don't think that. You don't think, oh, this is going to be the Skumon and Cap show. Like, as a duo, they don't really...
I'll find it pretty incredible.
Yike Caps was way better, by the way. Yike Caps was a way better duo than Skumon Caps.
Yeah. Like, and I think it's really important to note that, like, you go back a couple of years, however long ago, like, it would have been pretty unthinkable to give anyone but Caps MVP in his team. I think that was kind of crazy that Caps got finals MVP, and there was actually, like, a fair... Caps got finals MVP.
He robbed it.
Exactly. But that was the community consensus. Do you know how fucking good you have to be for the public to unanimously largely agree? Go like, yo, it should have been Skumon's. Like, that's so unheard of in the EU perspective of things. That's how good Skumon is. But the problem is, it is just jungle is tied to so many things, and I think that Shun is the best jungler at playing towards his combos at this tournament. Yeah, he is probably the guy that's going to overestimate himself in 1v1s more than the other junglers at that level. I think he can lose 1v1s on invades, on whatever, but he's way better at comboing up with people, which means that the jungle argument becomes a bit moot because Shun is so much better at leveraging the places where he has better connections.
Yeah. We're not going to really talk anymore about G2. One, because we talk about G2 every week. People know our general thoughts on G2. And I think we've talked enough about how we think they sort of match up, generally speaking, anyway. I do want to talk a bit more about LYON. Obviously, I think a lot of people actually thought ahead of playoffs that C9 might be the representative from North America. Now, I believe Keire, correct me if I'm wrong, that you said at one point that you might have felt that NA looked better than Europe. This
I
split.
said that.
Oh,
was
you
me.
said
I'll
that.
stand on that.
Okay.
Yep.
You
I said that last year, by the way.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah, I said that throughout a lot of this regular split and towards the start of playoffs.
So yeah, my question, I guess, for you then is: one, do you still feel that that is the case? But also, two, do you feel like LYON are going to be the best representative of that, or would you personally have thought maybe C9 would fare better at this tournament?
Okay, was that to me or was that?
No, that was you. Sorry, no, Mary. That was to you.
All right, just
whoever made the comment. So
okay, yeah, that was me. I mean, obviously C9 just fell the fuck apart. I think that they were very much leveraged on the fact that they had the best early game read of anyone in the region. Blabber got ahead very aggressively, and he could like when Blabber actually has a really good early game understanding, he does snowball it very, very well. But I think that it's a very
by the
dangerous
way,
thing
very
to have an
quickly,
early-
the only NA I watched at all was the finals, and I actually had to go back and do some research to find out whether or not Blabber was still meant to be a good player, because he was
Oh, no,
fucking
he was in his
awful
best,
in that.
He was in his best form he's been for like
Okay,
years in regular season. But being ahead in early game, it's one of the easier things to sit down and decode as an opposing team, especially when you've got a player like Inspired who's so good at kind of getting the most out of an early game. So obviously that early lead in jungle tech didn't last them long enough, and I think that APA and Sven fell off a cliff in terms of individual ability. I'll echo what Yamato was saying on Power Spike the other day as well, which is effectively just like, there's only so much you can kind of cover for strategy or whatever. At the end of the day, just a lot of individuals just played like shit on C9. I think that they mental boomed. I think you look at America's Cup, and I think that they played like trash there. Although I will say that there are a lot of people who, well, realistically, Fury are the better team than Loud. They just have a mental block versus like certain teams, and that kind of ended up working against them in the in their own regional bracket. So Furia were actually a very good team at America's Cup, and C9 fell to them. Even then, it's like you would expect C9 to be doing very well at tournaments like that, given the level of play that they had in regular season. So the fact that LYON made it over them is obviously really big, but they had a huge step up themselves in some really key roles. I think that Saint regular season, he was trash. I think he really, really played well across playoffs though. And then suddenly when you have a mid lane that's doing well, top lane that's picking stuff like Aurelia and Vayne and making it work too, it actually gave Inspired something to work off of which he didn't have. Because you could see how frustrated he was and how much he was trying to work with very little. And then suddenly his lane has turned into play and he's like, okay, well, I have a platform to be the guy that runs NA as a whole region now. So that was a big change for them. And I think actually coming into this tournament, as long as Isles doesn't have an absolute nightmare against some really good bot lanes and 2v2 falls apart, I think that with Inspired at the helm and Saint on really good form, I think there's actually a chance that they could take like stuff off as like a team like JDG, like I was saying. Because if you get Ginger into a bad spot, JDG look very, very mortal. And there's a chance that Inspired could be the guy to do that. I can see a world which that happens because JDG have got this kind of like, they are this, the Jing Dong Death Star, and they have this one exhaust port of like, well, shut down Ginger, and then the team becomes a lot more mortal. If you can manage to thread that needle with Inspired, I actually think they could have a really good shot here.
Interesting. Keire, what are your thoughts on LYON? And I have to ask you this, because, everyone always, even in 2026, probably cares a certain extent about the whole EU versus NA thing. Although I do think ever since they went to the other branding, I think people just no longer really cared about that. Like, they got memed at Worlds or whatever, but no one really gave a fuck. Do you think, Keire, that this LYON team is stronger than G2? I'll just ask you that straight up.
Right, first of all, there is no NA versus EU when like the best. This is like the LPL thing that's kind of bullshit. Like when your best player is a European player and he's literally irreplaceable. The key thing has to be he's irreplaceable. Like in IG, can you replace the Cheyenne rookie? Go and replace someone with a Chinese equivalent. Knight wasn't that good at the time, right? So you can. So it matters that they're Korean. So you can hardly say it was an LPL one. Okay, let's go into FPX. Can you replace Doinby? No? Shut the fuck up then, right? There isn't an LPL equivalent for Doinby, so he's literally irreplaceable. The fact that he is Korean matters, right? Can you replace Inspired? No? Shut the fuck up then, right? The fact that he's European or Polish, he's Polish, isn't he?
Yep.
Yeah,
Polish.
matters in the sense of like any cannot replace him, right? Lions as a team does not function without Inspired. He is literally the most important piece, and he is European. So you're being carried by Europe anyway. So even if you win, you lose, right? Europe can only defeat itself. The only thing you can say is Inspired makes a better team with Koreans on it than it does with Europeans. Brilliant. I've learned so much about NA versus EU. The next best player on his fucking team is bot laner. And maybe he's mid laner. And he's not, like, choking. Where's the NA component? Dokla had been into him. Brilliant. This is like the fucking... At least Doublelift had the decency to be arguably to be the best player on his teams.
How about let's call them an LCS team then instead of a North American team. How does this best of LCS match up against the best of LEC, Keire?
Here's the thing. I think Inspired isn't as good as Skumon right now, but that doesn't mean Inspired won't beat him. What I mean is like, in terms of jungler disabling another jungler and countering and and playing the map and controlling the game, I think Inspired might be better. But in terms of a jungler carrying a game, I think Skumon's better. Do you understand? Like, there used to be this phenom in the LPL where Clearlove was the best carry jungler. And all the teams that had the anti-carry junglers were good against EDG because if Clearlove wasn't a carry threat, then the team wasn't as powerful. But those players weren't better players than Clearlove. It's like this.
They were just the antidote.
Yes. Now, Inspired isn't as extreme as that, but I'm giving that allegory to explain why the head-to-head can be the way it is. I think Inspired is coming into this tournament in very impressive form. I think this team will have a lot of problems at this tournament. I think their bot lane needs to be really, really sharp. Because Isles Berserker, I know in NA, I think they could be getting blown out more than Hansama.
I was going to say, like, if we're going to give G2 shit for their bot lane, like Isles, I mean, on the international stage...
But Isles can play a depth of stuff that doesn't play the game. Like, Isles can play like Seraphine with Ashe, right? And they're not playing real League of Legends, right? He can play like... He had that
Labrov
one profi
plays
game that was...
Seraphine.
Yeah, but you've got to take it away from him. Is G2 going to take it away from him? Like, Ev's bots... Like, I've watched G2 let people just play their best champions, like, 4 games in a row, you know what I mean?
Sure,
like,
yeah.
I don't think that's as much of, like, how coaches... You know, I think the way we think is very separate from the way our coaches think.
I just also think that LCS level of bot lane is just not that high compared to LEC.
Yeah.
I mean, you can like you look at the top 3 bot lanes, they've got like Sven, Vulcan, who are actually very good in regular season. They just weren't. They were okay in playoffs, but they weren't fantastic. And then obviously in team fights, still to fall off. You have Berserker and Isles. Berserker's very good. Isles definitely a weak link there. And you've got like Rahel and Huhi, and like Rahel was in LEC for a while, and I mean. He was like good. He was good, but he wasn't at the level of the top tier bot lanes within LEC. And you compare, you know, LEC top bot lanes of like, you know, Super Alvaro actually had some really high moments. Kalist and Busio were really, really good. And then Hans Labrov were at least competitive, even if we thought they were worse than Kalist Busio. Just region to region, it does seem like the player pool probably take things with a pinch of sugar, I guess, with Hans and Labrov, where we're worried about them because of the level that they showed against like Kalist Busio. But that they probably still would be better than most analogs within.
Well, I also think that like I think a big part of the narrative around the G2 bot lane as well is that despite what community sentiment might be, I think Hans has had an uncharacteristically bad split. I think generally he's been like the model of consistency and perennially underrated, to be honest, most of his career, outside of a small period on Rogue where he was actually overrated, ironically. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Hans did like a mini Broken Blade from last year where he randomly just starts playing like the best AD carry in LEC again. I mean, as good as I think Kalist is, by the way, I think if you just picked any random point like last year, for example, and just told me, no matter about who you think is playing better right now, who do you think is actually the better AD carry that you would like want on your team just right now? I'd probably have said Hans, just because I think he was Mr. Reliable, been there, done that a million times over. So like, even though, as I said, I think Hans is not having the best moment of his career individually, I kind of expect him to come back a bit and step up and be that player again. So Yeah, it's one of those things in League where, because we can't see the physical aspects, it's not like, oh look, his legs have gone or whatever. Unless it continues for a
His
really
box is gone.
yeah,
Oh my god, his
unless
box is gone.
it continues for a really extended period of time, you do kind of assume you're going to see like the best of someone again, or that's at least possible. So I actually think, but then obviously then you weigh it up with like, oh, but Hans has never been good internationally. It's like,
No,
whatever.
he has.
Yeah,
No, he had that. He had that rogue run where he was
no,
like the outright best
no,
player.
mate, I agree. I'm saying that's like the narrative. I think it's, again, that is an overstated narrative. Do I think he's generally been better in like domestic playoffs than on the international stage? Sure, but I think he has been good internationally. I wouldn't be surprised if Hans actually has a good tournament. I think he's probably due. So yeah.
No,
Whereas
Hans'
Isles,
problem.
I'm just like, there's no world where Isles is good at this tournament. By the way, that's the thing. Like, I just don't see it. Like, is that gonna happen? Like, it's just not, is it?
No, it's the problem with Hans at this tournament. Not any tournament, by the way. A wee criticism of Hans. I love him, by the way. One of my like favorite players to watch. I think this the second half of the EU dynasty has been built on him. By the way, it's actually been built on like his back with Yike, his back with Skumond a little bit. You know what I mean? Like the Skumond period probably less, but like him and I know a lot of people credit like Mickey X, but like supports don't kill everybody. Yike and
Hans was the guy who always showed up when Caps didn't. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's the difference, and you can't say that about all of like fucking Caps' teammates. But let me put it as that his like big spikes, he doesn't have them. Caps is Hans. Hans is either 8, 9 out of 10, right? And he's very fucking good. He is never 10.
Yep.
There is never, very rarely. Oh my god, if Hans Samuel was in this game, this fucking game was over. He took it over from point 8. Like, the last game times he did that were like maybe the Draven games in 2023 winter, right? During a very specific period of time where him and Mickey were by far the best bot lane, right? Outside of that, he's either, oh my god, Hans, you're at an international event, why are you losing to Brazil and getting solo kills in bushes? Or, oh my god, how can someone from EU be this consistent? He looks Korean, 8, 9 out of 10.
By the way, you're gonna hate this analogy. You're gonna hate this analogy.
On you go. On you go.
He's European deft, by the way. Like, I don't care what anyone said. Like, to me,
No, I don't hate it. I get it. Yeah,
Deft is like obviously at a more elite level, but Deft is the guy who's like almost always like nearly at the ceiling, but never breaking through the ceiling. And then his peers, who are probably less consistent and didn't have as many super solid years as Deft, every now and then just punch through the ceiling, and you're just like, fucking hell, no one can deal with that guy. Like that's Hans.
Definitely, I will say this: he definitely LCK Deft. Like LCK Deft, you're describing that exact player. LPL Deft was a little bit different, where like Deft literally couldn't be given like 3 champions and things like that.
I didn't watch him in LPL, so I didn't watch him in LPL.
No, I'm just saying what you analogize. That's what I'm agreeing with it in principle, because I actually think it's very thing. Like Deft has never hit the highs of Viper. He's never hit the highs of Guma. He hasn't. It has not. But Guma and Viper, maybe Viper's 2021, but Guma certainly has never had a year as good as Deft.
Yeah.
He's never had 3 years as good as Deft. So.
Yeah.
Very good. Well done, Rich. Good one there.
So, now just clip it up and put Hansama equals Deft, and there we go. Similar careers, similar accomplishments, I would say. But yeah, for me, just to sort of summarize on that point, unfortunately, I don't think there's like some great Western hope at this tournament, which is a shock to absolutely no one. But I do kind of feel like there is again, this is not some amazing hitting the presser level announcement. I think there's basically a 0% chance that either of these teams can actually win this tournament. Whereas I think, in previous international tournaments, at least in recent years, you could craft some weird angle where it's like, if it meta just hits just nicely here, they've got a wink on a Skumond being awesome, isn't it? But I do think Skumond, well, in essence, Skumond, I do think G2 could beat FEARX potentially. I think they could be a JDG as well potentially. And with BLG, actually, you never really know. What I'm really saying is neither of these Western teams are going to beat GENG. That's the crazy hot take that I'm putting out there.
Can I just say one more note? Just because I love to pick it up. I think Riot, because if they do the good things, I think they should be congratulated. I think First Stand is a fantastic tournament. I think I would just love more First Stands. You're looking at this tournament and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so excited. It's all BO5s. It's a week long, Monday, grand finals on Sunday, I think people are going to be in for a real treat. I think because if you were to think about this, like even if you're like Loud or Team Secret, I think it's Team Secret Wales. Yeah, Team
Yeah.
Secret
Yeah,
Wales.
Team
Right,
Secret
okay.
Wales, yeah.
Right, you're going into this and you can play upset. You can absolutely you are getting a BO5 against a select opponent, bespoke opponent, which you can prepare for. Right, you definitely know it, and then you have a best guess chance at who your lower bracket opponent is going to be. So you can basically somewhat prepare for two opponents, right? Okay, so you get two prepared for BO5s. What a great way to set up teams that are like, being drawn in unfavorable situations. Plus, you get two BO5s. If you get two BO5s and you get knocked out of a tournament, you can't
You're still
fucking
happy
complain.
as well,
Yeah.
I think. So I think particularly in the past, as someone who comes from a minor region background from covering Japan for a number of years, it was always very demoralizing to have a team basically, well, when it came to the old play-in stage when you had like a major region team in your group, it felt like you would turn up and you'd have effectively 2 or 3 meaningful best of ones at a tournament, and then you'd be out. I think that changed around 23. That's when things started to change a lot for that. And now we're getting to the point where teams who probably wouldn't have had these opportunities before, or at least some of them wouldn't have had, are now getting double best of fives. I mean, there were points where it felt like minor regions, it was a success if you saw a best of 5 at an international event. I was sat there, watching DFM lose best of ones or what have you, or V3 Esports lose best of ones in 2020 Worlds, and I'm sat there like, well, if they at least got a best of 5, they get some meaningful practice rather than flying out for like 2 or 3 games, which actually meant something when you're not against T1, or whoever else is in, someone big within group stage rather, playing stage, and then you just have to fly home. So the fact that you actually get this is really, really cool. This is actually meaningful experience for teams in a way that we didn't. We would take it for granted that we have it now, but we didn't used to have that for a handful of teams.
Yeah, and what I would just say as well is, I think outside of Worlds, this is the way that you should do more international tournaments of this style. Like, this is how you build momentum and weirdly storyline for a tournament like this, is you do just have it over a week, proper series play from the start, and you just play through the tournament, start to finish, over 1 week, 10 days, brilliant. Worlds is obviously a bit different because you want time to process everything. It does have a certain gravitas and grandeur where, apart from anything else, Riot, I think most years does a really good job with like the video pieces that they do, like ahead of semi-finals and finals and stuff like that. So it makes more sense to pace that a bit, even though I think they should probably decrease the amount of time that Worlds is played over. I think it's a bit too much. But you do need elements to breathe there. Whereas with a tournament like this, as you said, I think you just want it exactly how it is. I just want a couple more of them. I would rather personally go back to 2 domestic splits, which were played over a shorter amount of times, and then you plug in maybe even 2 extra international tournaments. I understand logistics are a thing, and money is a thing, so it is what it is. But hey, maybe we're online either next year or the year after, and then we'll see if that changes anything. But before we go, we do need to touch on these other 2 teams. I will not leave us without, speaking about Secret Wales, so obviously the LCP champions, and Loud, who are the CBLOL Brazilian champions. First of all, I will just say I have not watched 1 minute of League of Legends from either of these teams from this year. So, Nymaera, do you have any thoughts on Secret Wales? Let's start with.
Actually, can I start with Loud? Actually,
Yeah,
Secret
sure.
Wales. So are actually the team I'm not prepped on this time. So I will preface that I'm not prepped on Secret
let's
Wales.
talk
I'm going to
about
chat to I'm going to chat to to Vestian and FEARX about that team in a little bit, but I haven't got it in time for this show. I did, however, do is I watched through their playoff series with Trajan, who's been covering the region for ages and ages on CBL English yesterday. I think Loud are a worse team than Furia, but Loud had like the better kind of like individual kind of like mental diff versus the teams which they beat in their playoffs. Funniest thing about Loud is the fact that they changed mid laner partway through playoffs or partway through this split, because their mid laner before that, I think it was Margot was his name, just upped and left. He just upped and left. The guy just like flipped out, left, and they had to get this guy Envy.
Box is gone.
Yeah, so it's just like, that's just fucking ridiculous, by the way. Like, gosh, yeah. So basically, they had Margot but in before, and yeah, Loud. I have worries about how much Loud can achieve at this tournament because they're not a strong early game team. I think that Shino is actually a pretty good individual top laner. I think he's gonna surprise a lot of people, especially since CBLOL's become quite a good top lane region now. I mean, it kind of started with, I mean, you had Robo for a while, and then really after that it was Gigo and FNB who kind of came up as top laners to really kind of contest CBLOL top laner. Shino's come in. This guy's one of the youngest kids at the event. He was born in 2007, same as Honkyu, same as Diablo, and a handful of other very young players at this event. They were born in the same year that Halo 3 was released, and that makes me very, very strange. It makes me feel very strange about that. But he's very good individually. Trust him to pick stuff like the Akali into Gwen matchup and play that out well. Young Jay is actually not bad from Loud as well. Like, that guy can pull the trigger fairly effectively. I'm quite worried about this team in early games, though, and I don't think they will survive through to what are actually pretty good 5v5 drafts later into the game. They're just a very quiet team. I think partly it's because they're integrating Envy into the roster. Maybe they'll look different at this event because they've had more time to integrate Envy, their mid laner into their roster. But yeah, Loud are a team which I don't think many people expected Loud to make it, especially after the change. The fact that here is an achievement already. I mean, I hope they do well. I hope that they get to play, very passionately to the Loud fans in the first-hand audience, but I think the early game really, really worries me, and I think that will set them behind a lot of the teams at the event.
Fair enough. Keire, do you have any thoughts on either of these two teams?
Yeah, if you want to know about Team Secret Wales, consult Ben Meek on Twitter, who covers that region, I believe.
Vestian, yeah.
Is that what it goes by? And the other person is the god himself, Andrew Di Stefano, has done the Team Secret Wales preview, where he actually thinks it's one of the fun and most, and he's in his opinion, most interesting teams at the event. So high praise from the man himself.
Definitely. Oh, by the way, FEARX, who's their current play-by-play for VCS English, was for VCS English. FEARX has been covering Vietnam, which is where Team Secret Wales are from, for longer than I covered LGL. So he's been covering this team for like 7 years, by the way. So definitely go talk to him as well.
And unfortunately, Loud, as cool as your promo pieces might be, didn't watch, don't care. That's the category. You're the didn't watch, don't care category. But there is so much content around the Brazilian speaking world. If you feel so passionately about it, you probably do not need to receive it from here.
I was going to say, probably very few people are coming here to get our takes on the CBLOL scene.
Exactly.
But the big thing is, I do think that Team Secret World support, he's actually been very good for a while. He actually might upset a couple of support matches, particularly when you look at, like, if Labrov has a bad moment, and he can, have some bad moments, or Isles has a bad moment, and they do come up against those teams at some point, maybe we'll see, right? There's a chance that Eddie and B actually do some real damage.
One thing, I will say something, 'cause I know about Lions players. Do you remember this guy, Young Jay? Young Jay's the jungler?
Yep. He was a Breon guy, right?
Yep.
For some point.
I have a note written down on you, Nymaera.
Yeah, well, the fun thing about that is I'm fairly sure that Young Jay was like,
Yep.
I'm not actually sure he even played for Bro. He was on loan to them. And Trajan then drops the immortal line that he was, because on loan to Bro, he was a step bro instead. Like, this guy was on loan to them for like only a handful of months. So like, he wasn't like on a top tier LCK team is what we're saying. And he didn't even see any time on Bro.
So, I've literally got it written down. Is Young Jay the worst player ever in LCK? I've got that written down as a note.
Jesus Christ.
Like, for a game, for a series, I remember, because I was on a show with Atlas and Thorin, and I literally wrote it down, is Young Jay the worst player ever in LCK? Winner of Brazil, all I'm gonna say.
Well, how awesome is it, by the way, that BLG's first best of 5 is against BFX, and G2 are playing Secret Wales? Seems very fair.
Yeah, the seedings are something, right? At least it's GSL groups, but yeah.
Hey, if BLG loses, they've got a perfectly fine path through the lower bracket. If they lose to 2 teams, they've got no one to complain about than themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. Ultimately, you're kind of, well, from my perspective, playing for the right to see if you're good enough to do something to Gen G or not. So if you're dropping to teams not named Gen G, then do we care anyway? Probably not. Anyway, that's going to be it for this week, guys. So thank you all very much for watching. And because of the structure of the tournament, maybe we'll just see you after the tournament. I'm not sure. Hopefully we'll pick a moment when there's like, I don't know. I'd have to check. Maybe we'll see you then. Maybe we won't. Who knows? All I know is we'll see you at some point. Maybe, probably. This isn't Complaints Truck, so I guess at some point.